And our top story this hour comes in from the United States, where it's been a major fallout of the shutdown in America. For the first time, the world's largest economy is going to remain unprecedented at a meeting of the World Economic Forum. And United States is clearly not going to be present at Davos. The summit is in Switzerland is taking place at a time when the world is searching for new headwinds to ride out of the economic slowdown. Trade tensions between the US and China, challenges for pushing the world toward a fourth industrial revolution, climate change and rising protectionism and militarization is on the table as the world's political and industrial elite sit down for talks next week in the Alpine resort. But the biggest talking shop of all America would be absent at the high table. The White House has announced that the US delegation won't be traveling to Davos. She said this was because of the 27-day-long government shutdown over funding for a border wall. White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders said, and I quote, "Out of consideration for the 800,000 great American workers not receiving pay and to ensure his team can assist as needed, President Trump has cancelled his delegation's trip to the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland." President Trump had already cancelled his own trip to the summit, dashing hopes of a meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping and possible end to the trade war. U.S. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross, United States Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer, and Deputy Chief of Staff for Policy Coordination Chris Liddell were among those scheduled to visit Switzerland for the annual conference in Trump's absence. Now that stands cancelled as well. Reports say overseas trips for senior officials could be difficult to organise at a time when government workers have been furloughed. And to bring us more details and add perspective to this ongoing story, I'm joined in by our correspondent Harry Horton, who joins me live from Washington, D.C. for more on this. Let's quickly go across to Harry. Harry, a very warm welcome. You know, now that President Donald Trump has finally flexed his executive muscle by cancelling Nancy Pelosi's Afghanistan trip, is the shutdown becoming a tussle of one-upmanship between the U.S. president and the Democrats?
Yeah, I mean, it appears that way. Look, the talks between Democrats and the White House and President Trump have been, on off for the past 4 weeks of this government shutdown, but they haven't really led anywhere, and I think on the basis of the evidence of the past 48 hours, the two sides, the relationship between them is becoming more and more sour rather than more conducive to finding a way to open this government. So, I think we could be here for several more days, if not several more weeks now. There's no clear exit strategy here. Normally when these government shutdowns happen, well, first of all, they only happen for a few days, but we always have some idea about how they might end. There's always a compromise in sight, and it just takes a bit of time for both parties to get there. On this issue, the Democrats have refused to give any money towards Donald Trump's border wall. Donald Trump says he's not going to reopen the government without the money he wants to pay for his wall. So there doesn't seem to be any middle ground there. Really difficult to see how this is going to end as the impact of this shutdown is spreading further and further.
Absolutely. As you rightly mentioned, there seems to be no exit strategy out here. Interestingly, hours after denying Pelosi the use of the military plane, President Trump cancelled the U.S. delegation's planned visit to Davos. Could this move actually have serious ramifications, considering a World Economic Forum was crucial at a time of an ongoing trade war or rising fuel prices?
Yeah, absolutely. It could have big ramifications for those trade talks with China. There are some trade talks with China scheduled for later this month, January the 30th and January the 31st. Here in Washington, D.C., this decision to cancel the trip to Davos puts huge pressure now on those talks in Washington. Of course, we're in the middle of this 90-day trade truce period where the U.S. has said it won't impose any more tariffs on China. But if we get to the end of this 90-day period and the U.S. and China can't come up with some sort of new trade deal, there's a whole raft of new tariffs due to come into place. The world markets are pretty nervous about that prospect. So, every possible meeting that the US and China can have at the moment is crucial to finding a way out of this trade war that the two sides find themselves in. Just one other point as well about this shutdown, it's affecting staff levels at the US Trade Office. They're currently operating at about a third of their usual staffing levels. So, that's having an impact on the amount of staff who can work and advise these senior officials on trade deals. So, the longer this shutdown goes on, it's not just affecting domestic policies now, it really is spreading over into international US policies and their relationships with other countries around the world.
Very rightly mentioned, Harry, that this is spreading over to international policies of the United States, as we just saw that the US delegation's planned visit to Davos has been cancelled. Is the shutdown's impact gradually snowballing, because it seems to be affecting critical departments like the Homeland Security and US Secret Service too, not to forget the global economical impact as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And look, one other crucial department that it's impacting is within the transport departments. Security workers who work at airports screen passengers before they get on flights, look at people's bags. We are seeing record sick levels within those departments. At the moment, US airports are able to cope, and they insist that there is no security threat to America's airspace. But we're seeing some unions of those employees warning that, look, there's a real risk here that if this shutdown continues and staffing levels continue to reduce because people simply can't afford to pay their bills, they're forced to find other jobs so they can pay their rent and and pay for their food and things like that. There could be a real security threat to America's airspace, and we could see some backlog of air travel within the United States. Now that would have a serious economic impact, and that would put tremendous pressure on both the White House and on Congress to find some sort of way to restore those funds so that those staff can get paid and to end this government shutdown.
Maybe that is exactly what Donald Trump is looking for, to actually pressurize the government into moving towards some sort of a deal. But that also brings me to the State of the Union address by the President. Will Nancy Pelosi be able to delay Trump's State of the Union address? Tell us more about this address, and has any former president delivered it during a shutdown?
Well, look, the State of the Union address is a big annual speech given by the President. The President is invited to go over to Congress and lay out their plans for the year ahead, to talk about what they feel are their big successes from the previous year. But there's a lot of pomp and ceremony around these things, but they do give us some clues as to what sort of things the administration might focus on over the next 12 months. Nancy Pelosi has essentially pulled the rug under from Donald Trump. She does have the power to essentially cancel that speech, and that's what she's done. Now, reports suggest that the White House was caught off guard by her decision to cancel that speech. The White House was uncharacteristically quiet in the aftermath of that announcement, but they've now hit back with this decision, as we've learnt, to cancel Nancy Pelosi's trip, or cancel transport for Nancy Pelosi's planned trip to Brussels and Afghanistan. So look, this tit for tat between Democrats and Republicans seems to be going on, and I think when you look at the state of relations between those two sides, the fact that they're trading blows with each other, that suggests to the rest of America and the rest of the world that they're not really in a position at the moment to sit down around a table and find a way out of this shutdown, this record length shutdown that we find ourselves in the middle of.
Absolutely, and this certainly calls for them to actually come to the negotiating table and get out of this. For now, thank you so much for joining us and giving us all the latest on this developing story. Harry Horton joining us live from Washington over there.